Hello and welcome to another episode of the Hooligan Report. I'm joined today just by Cruyff,
Good morning.
in a good one-on-one interview, I guess. How have you been, Cruyff? How are you finding Arsenal's last few results?
The pressure's off and we start to perform again. If it was like that all season, it'd be really good. But unfortunately, it's not the case. But it's nice to see players like Iwobi really working hard and showing some more of the senior players how things should be done. Him and Welbeck in particular really show how hard work goes and I guess the determination for the team with players like Walcott, Oxlade-Chamberlain, and Ramsey could really learn from that and things like that.
I find it really interesting with Iwobi because obviously we've got Chuba Akpom on loan and he's not even making the squad these days because of his lack of effort and his attitude in matches and in training. And I find it really interesting because surely a player like that, who was on the cusp of the Arsenal senior squad at the start of the season, I mean, Wenger said he wasn't going to send Akpom out on loan again. Um, so he was quite close, but surely he has to look at someone like Iwobi and the amount of work and work ethic that Iwobi has, and sort of look at himself and say, well, okay, this is why I'm out on loan at Hull, not getting a game, and that's why this guy's starting games for Arsenal and scoring
And,
goals in the
and
Premier League.
scoring, yeah. I mean, I think it comes down to how you are as a person as well, whether how ambitious, how driven you are, how hard you want to work. I think it's not as black and white as maybe
Yeah.
we're both painting it. It's sort of personality traits as well, whether if you just have that like Sadai's attitude, oh yeah, she'll be right, mate, sort of thing. I'll get there. I know I've got the talent, but talent isn't really much use in football without hard work.
And someone like a Ben Arfa is the perfect example of
Exactly,
that, who had all the talent,
exactly,
and he's
exactly.
now playing in France.
Al-
So that,
al- Although on Ben Arfa, I saw last night he scored 13 goals in Ligue
yeah,
1, so he's
I think
maybe a bit of a revival.
yeah, I think he's on the radar of a few of the bigger clubs. I'm not sure. I do know that he was linked to a few um, higher Premier League clubs, which was a bit interesting because it can sort of descend into that sort of cycle again where he looked really good in France and got picked up by Newcastle, had a flashy start to his career there and then sort of tailed off. Whether that would happen again if he came back into the lights of the Premier League, I'm not so sure. But he's enjoying himself at the moment in France, that's no doubt.
Definitely, and maybe being back in France is good for him as well, home country and all that. So
Yeah,
culture.
absolutely.
But I mean, he's the perfect example though. All that there's so much talent, but the attitude and other things really just sort of take a gloss off him as a player, I guess.
And another perfect example, which will lead us right into the first game to review, is Eden Hazard, who I think even was quoted recently as saying he just didn't have that drive to really push himself to be one of the best in the world, and it's really showing this season. But Chelsea still managed to get a 4-0 win over Aston Villa, which these days is about par for a performance against Aston Villa, I think.
Yeah, I guess it's like uh, winning a race against a fat kid. It's not really much of an achievement. I mean, it's Villa really. So
But you want to be winning. If you lose or draw, you know.
exactly, and all credit to Chelsea. I mean, they were very convincing. As I said, poor Villa side, but you can't take much away from Chelsea. They showed up and they did what they had to do, and they were playing quite good football.
And of note, I think it was Alexander Padow's first start for Chelsea, and he also got his first goal.
First appearance, he came on as a sub for the injured Remy.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
I think, yeah, but yeah, came on to well taken penalty and looked good.
And I think he also got the assist for well, I mean, if you consider it an assist for the Pedro's
Yeah,
goal at the end, which was a good shot. What is there to say about Villa? I mean, they've sacked Remy Gard over the international break, and I think they've got a caretaker manager in
yeah,
to see out the season.
Eric Black.
Um, would it make sense for Villa to look to bring in a permanent manager before the end of the season so that he can run the rule over the squad, I guess? Or would it be better waiting for the summer because they might get a better quality manager because managers might not want to come in
Well,
and add a relegation?
you just brought up two very good points for each argument. It's which one do you do? But I mean, can they get a high quality manager? Who can they get? I
Well,
mean,
yeah. When I say high quality manager, I mean like a Nigel Pearson
yeah,
versus
can they,
bringing someone,
can
I
a
don't know.
new manager do that much with the squad that they have? Maybe bring him in early so he can put his stamp on the squad and then sort of hone it over in the pre-season. But there's just so much work to do there.
It'd be interesting to see if if they do go after someone like I know Pearson and also David Moyes for some reason are being linked. If they actually sort of announce them immediately after the final match of the season, to sort of be like to literally give them as much time as possible, but not have them connected to the relegation.
Yeah, definitely. I
It'd be
mean, it's
interesting.
just it's. I don't know why Guard took the job in the first place. I don't think he's a bad manager, but what he had to work with was just rubbish, and you can definitely tell Villa aren't on drugs.
Well, it's interesting because I think Guard had a bit of a hissy fit after January because apparently he'd been promised funds in January to change the squad, which might explain why he went into the job. But they didn't sign any players in January, so um, whether there was any truth to the fact that he had funds to work with, or whether the board sort of lost confidence in him and refused him funds, would be an interesting one to find out.
Yeah, it's. I don't think the Villa board have handled anything well in the past how many X months, but it's if Guard's been promised funds to strengthen the squad, which they clearly need strengthening, and then the board have gone back on that promise, it just says everything about the club.
Yeah. There have been a few 4-0 wins to chat about, so we'll move on to your mob, who got the 4-0 win over Watford, and we've already talked a bit about Iwobi's performance in that game. Um, does this sort of get your season back on track, so to speak? I mean, you're one game in hand on Spurs and Leicester, and if you win that, you're only 1 point behind Spurs. Is there any chance of getting back in the title race, or is it just about finishing as high as possible now?
Say maybe a 3% chance, but um, so very very slim. But I mean, if football's a funny game, and if Leicester and Spurs drop points, not saying they will, if they do, and we win our game in hand and keep winning, then it sort of makes things interesting. But I can't see it happening. But I mean, I think we just need to consolidate on good performances and just keep going and finish as high as we can. Whether that's first, second, or third, who knows? But it's nice to see that the team performing again. Just a shame they couldn't do it when it really mattered. But I guess we can't have it both ways. And well, we can, but it'd be nice. But it's good to see that they've pulled their finger out and sort of playing the football we know they're capable of. And I think Wenger's finally worked out his right balance in midfield with El Neni and Coquelin. And that's the midfield that should be starting and giving players like Welbeck and Iwobi chances where they work hard for the team. Joel Campbell as well. And leaving players like Giroud, who's been out of form for a while, and Walcott undeserving on the bench.
And what have you made of Watford's season as a whole? Because I know they started the season really strongly and were looking decent for a top 10 sort of position, and they've certainly tailed off a lot now that they've got to about that 37, 38 point mark, which is basically safety. Um, I always find it interesting when that happens with sides because does that sort of show a lack of ambition? Because it's as if the manager's basically said to the players or the board have said to the manager, well, thanks very much, boys. You've got us safety. That's all we were after. You can stop trying now. And it always strikes me as a bit odd because surely you want to push on and finish as high as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I just checked, they're on 37 points from 31 games. I think, in a word, this season will be surprising. To sum it up in a word, but I think a lot of people might have written them off before the season began, but they've proved a lot of people wrong, and they have played good football at times with Dini and Igalo up top. So, I mean, they'll look to consolidate on that next season, and I'd say they'd be aiming for a mid-table sort of finish. I don't think they could be disappointed with 14. Could they have probably finished a bit higher? Yes, but they've had that sort of form slump over the new year and into 2016. But I don't think they can be disappointed at all with how their season's gone. And of course, they knocked us out of the FA Cup, so they don't really have any reason to be annoyed or disappointed.
Actually, that's a great point. So they're still in the FA Cup, so they've got a chance, however slim, of winning a piece of silverware there, which might be where their focus is now. But I mean, I certainly had them down as getting relegated, so I can't really say that their position hasn't surprised me. So it's certainly a very good achievement from them, and Igalo and Dini in particular looked very, very exciting earlier in the season. So it'll be interesting to see if they can kind of recapture that form going into next season, or whether there's any interest from bigger clubs for either of them in the off season. Um, the third 4-0 win was for Man City against Bournemouth, who, like Arsenal, has sort of trying to get back into that top four. race. And also, like Arsenal, they've got a game in hand, so they've got the double game week next week. Um, they're still they're only 1 point ahead of Man United for that top four spot, so it's very much hanging by a thread for them. Um, and it's interesting because I mean they seem to beat up on these smaller clubs like Bournemouth and I think it was Norwich a few weeks ago. Or actually no, Norwich was 0-0, wasn't it? It was one of the other clubs that they beat by quite a healthy margin, but
Yeah.
they seem to struggle um, to get any sort of consistency at the moment. How have you found their last few games?
Well, the goals against the Bournemouth were great. I mean, I saw another stat. With De Bruyne, they've won 59% of games, and without him, they've only won 33. So the contrast there is quite stark. But I think De Bruyne coming back will give them that consistency they need and another goal threat. Their goals against Bournemouth were great. The dink from Aguero to Silva, and then the side foot to De Bruyne, who then side footed in from the edge of the box. It was just absolutely magnificent play. And as I said, they've missed De Bruyne a lot. And that I think they should be the favourites for fourth if they just keep continuing the way they're going. Obviously, injuries will play a bit of a part, but obviously they've probably got the best squad in the league, aside from maybe Chelsea. But obviously, neither of those clubs are performing to the level they should be. But I think they should be favourites for fourth.
And then on the flip side, like with Watford, I mean, Bournemouth have had a pretty surprising season, I think, for most pundits' point of view. They were sort of the easy target, I suppose, in the pre-season as a relegation pick because of the size of the club and the strength of the squad. But there were some who had sort of seen them play in the Championship or knew Eddie Howe's tactics, and who really thought that they'd be okay in the Premier League, and they've certainly proven that. When you consider the fact that they're level on points with Everton, that may well be an indictment on Everton, but it's incredibly impressive from Bournemouth as well to essentially be mid-table.
Definitely. I mean, as you said, a lot of people wrote them. I had no idea about them. I think I just put them in the relegation zone because it seemed like a smart thing to do, and I was going with the tide. But I mean, they've surprised a lot of people. So I mean, they're actually ahead of Watford. Looking at the table, so Watford do have a game in hand. But I mean, there's no reason why they should be disappointed with this. You know, they've beat. I think they beat City early on in the season, didn't they?
Yeah, I think so. Or was
Or
it
a few.
was it a draw? I can't remember. Yeah.
They pulled off a few shock results, which, and again, all credit to them. So I
Oh,
mean,
no, that's right. They beat Chelsea and United back to back, and they were only the second team in the Premier League era to do that, or something like that.
yeah, I mean, it's crazy. So I mean, good on them, and I think again, like Watford, they'll look to consolidate on the season. Hopefully, neither side suffers from second season syndrome as we see so often after a side's been promoted. They have that good first year, and then they sort of just dwindle away, and then they're duking out in the relegation zone. But I mean, I don't think Bournemouth are an unlikable club, and they'll look to hopefully gain some more neutral fans and progress on their Premier League status.
And then the third promoted club, Norwich, also had a great win over Newcastle 3-2, scoring in stoppage time, and that result really gives them a shot in the arm because they're now 4 points clear of that relegation zone, and it has a really big impact on the relegation zone itself. Are Newcastle just about gone?
Yeah, I think you can write them off. I mean,
6 points.
Yeah, 25 points from 31 games, 2 behind Sunderland in 18, 6 behind Norwich in 17, who are out of the drop zone. I mean, you've got to start asking questions now. I think Mike Ashley's a detriment to that club, as everyone will so often say. But I mean, I think you can pretty much put a fork in them. They'll need a lot of results to go their way, and they'll have to start performing much better than what they have been to escape the drop.
And sadly, I mean, you look at the fact that they have a game in hand as perhaps a chance for them to cling to some hope, but their game in hand is against City, who Aguero put 5 past them the last time they played.
But and even then, a game in hand at this point in the season, if you're winning that game in hand and you're still going to be in the relegation zone, you're in big strife.
Yeah, and I feel like at this stage of the season, games in hand are actually a detriment rather than a positive because Hull have a game in hand as well in the Championship, and Middlesbrough had games in hand at a little bit earlier in the season, and people kind of cling to that and assume that that's going to be 3 points in the bank.
Yeah.
You kind of unconsciously always say, oh well, there's a game in hand, well that's going to be an extra 3 points, and it's not always the case. And in some ways, it actually puts more pressure on the players because their rivals put points on the board like Norwich have done, and actually have those points in the bank. And Newcastle then have that pressure to go out and get those 3 points, excuse me, which they might not actually be able to get. And it puts that extra pressure on them.
Yeah, I mean it's yeah, it can be detrimental as you've said, and you'd like to think it's going to be 3 points, but it's often not that straightforward. And at the point in the season, and if you're in the relegation zone, I think 3 point things are very hard to try and guarantee your club.
Absolutely. We then had probably the resident shit fight matchup on the was it Sunday night? No, it was a late game on the Saturday between Liverpool and Spurs, and unfortunately it finished 1-1. It would have been nice to see one of them get the victory, so it would at least shut up the losing set of fans. But we had the draw, so we've got both of them thinking that they came out on top in that one. How did you see the matchup between Liverpool and Spurs?
I only really saw the goals, but I think to me Spurs are still sort of rung ahead of Liverpool in terms of where they are as the club and the players at the club. Probably a bit controversial, but I mean, and I don't think I really can be accused of being biased, being an Arsenal fan, because I don't particularly like Spurs, but the way they're playing and the players they have, it's hard not to sort of appreciate how they're going about things, the style of football Pochettino has them playing, and the results they're getting. I mean, that's not really anything. That's not something to say bad about Liverpool, but I mean they've suffered under Rodgers. Klopp's going to take a while to put his stamp on things and bring in players he wants and get the team as cohesive as he would like. But I think right now Spurs are the ones that are ahead, and it says something about Liverpool trying to always compare themselves to Spurs, where Spurs are sitting second on the table and will have Champions League next season, whereas Liverpool just keeps sort of comparing themselves to Spurs. Oh, we're better than you at this, we're better than you at that, rah, 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 rah. But, I mean, the table really doesn't lie.
Well, it was quite interesting because I think it would have been early in the season with a group of my mates. We were chatting about who we thought was closer to a first Premier League title between Liverpool and Spurs, and I was quite confident in saying Spurs. And at that point of the season, Spurs weren't. I don't think they were even sitting in the top four, and so it attracted a bit of Controversy, and it's hard not to go past Spurs as having that more well-rounded squad. And I think on the board in the last few days, there was a bit of a discussion about Spurs' chances of backing up next season. And I think the common theme between Leicester and Spurs, who've both surprised pretty much everyone this season, is the fact that their squad is so cohesive and that they actually are almost better than the sum of the parts. Because you look at Spurs and they've got so many of their youth players coming through, whether it's Kane or whether it's even guys like Mason and Dyer. Well, I mean, Dyer they only got a few seasons ago, but it's that young English core that's really quite cohesive. And you look at someone like Liverpool, who every season they seem to chop and change so much of their squad, and it'll likely happen for Liverpool, for City, for United, who'll bring in a bunch of new players who are highly rated. They'll spend 30 to 40 million on them, and then there'll be all of this imbalance in the squad. I mean, we're talking about Goetze coming in for Liverpool, and do they need another attacking midfielder?
Probably not.
So it's a very interesting one. I did want to make the point, though, it was a bit interesting that Spurs fans seem to have a bit of a higher opinion of their squad than perhaps is warranted. I mean, having said that they've got quite a cohesive squad, you look at some of their depth players, and I'm not too sure that they really stack up compared to other top 4 or top 6 challengers. When you've got guys like, I mean, Ryan Mason, Tom Carroll, Ben Davies, Kieran Trippier, Michel Vorm, Townsend, who's now gone, Pritchard. I mean, Pritchard's highly rated, so I think he'll come on in time. But Danny Rose. I mean, Danny Rose has sort of improved this season, and Bentaleb as well. They're good players, but they're not great players. And I don't think that they'd really get many chances at other top 4 challengers.
I think Verm as a second keeper is quite a solid choice. It's second keeper, playing second goalkeeper is, I guess, a tough position to be in, and the depth, I think, considerably drops off there more than any other position. But I don't think he's a bad backup. I'm not saying he's fantastic, but I don't think he's terrible. Mason's been okay from what I've seen. Haven't seen much of Carroll. I'm trying to think of other players you named. Trippier I don't think he's been given that much of a chance, has he?
He has started. Yeah, he's only started 5 games, and then
Yeah.
there's one off the bench. The other one, of course, is Chadley, who Chadley had a very good season last year. From memory, he scored quite a few goals early on, but he hasn't quite looked up to it this season,
I,
and
I
he's
think
had 10
I
starts.
think he's good backup though. I mean, that's a handy winger to have to come off the bench sort of 60 minutes in and sort of run at defenses with fresh legs. But I don't think that's a bad backup either. But um, I don't think like sort of players. I don't think Ben Davies is too bad. I'm not saying he's fantastic again, but I don't think he's terrible. But I think sort of players like Carroll and sort of the younger ones you mentioned. Maybe some of the Spurs fans are getting a bit carried away there, but then if we look at Liverpool's depth, like, is it that much better?
Well, that's a fair point. I mean, they've certainly got the depth up top that Spurs don't have. When you look at Liverpool, they just have an absolute glut of strikers. Um, but
But then there's one in
in
Balotelli who they
defence, yeah,
don't want. I mean, Sturridge is never on the park. Firmino can play up top, I guess, and
Ariki's looked okay. I
but
think
yeah,
he's certainly come on this season.
he's been at Benteke they don't want. So is the depth really that great if three of the players they don't want there? I mean, it's I don't know. I don't think Benteke is a poor player by any means. I'd take him at Arsenal. I think he'd fit well in our system. But I mean, it's an interesting topic, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And then in defence for them, they've got players like Lovren and Toure. Lovren's looked a little bit better this season, but I
Mm-hmm.
mean, he still doesn't seem to be up to scratch for a top four side.
I, I
Gomez,
think, I think sorry to cut you off. I think
sorry, sorry.
Touré's done.
Yeah,
I think he'll be moved on next season. Sacco, not Sacco. Skirtle will go. So, but then again, not bad depth to have. But reading comments from Liverpool fans on the board, he seems pretty much done.
and of course, their centre midfield, which is apparently world class. When you've got Henderson and Shan in there, I think Shan could be a promising player for them, but
Yes, definitely.
I think it's a little early to call him
But
world
there,
class.
there was a thing made the other day where a midfield of Jan Henderson, I can't remember who else was among the
Coutinho and
best.
Goetze, was it?
I think it was
Were they
among the best in
presuming
the
Goetze?
league, but there's no strength there. I mean, who's the ball winner in that four? You
Yeah.
could say Jean, but he's not like a sort of tough guy that can't do the dirty work. Sort of like your Coquelin. Like there's no strength there really. Like, creativeness, yes, but strength, I don't see it.
And Firmino's their top scorer in the Premier League at the moment with 8 goals. Coutinho's an interesting one that we haven't really touched on. I remember pre-season, I think, suggesting that for him to really sort of break out and be considered one of the best in the Premier League, he needed probably about 10 goals for the season and 7 or 8 assists sort of thing. And so he's on track for that because he's got 7 in the Premier League. What have you made of Coutinho's season?
If he continues on his rise, he's better than Liverpool, in my opinion. And I don't mean that in any disrespect, but I mean, you see big clubs come knocking. Not saying that Liverpool aren't a big club, but Coutinho, I think he's only 24, maybe. If he keeps on his on this sort of rise, there's no reason why he couldn't go to a bigger club or a more prestigious club, I guess, in the Champions League, providing Liverpool don't make it. And I don't think he deserved. Did he get Player of the Year last year?
For Liverpool?
Or no, who got Player of the Year last year?
Oh, sorry.
Maybe it was Hazard.
I think
But
it's Hazard, yeah.
I mean, he had this flourish around January to April or something last year. Cool, but what did he do for the first half of the season?
Yeah.
I mean, but I think he's probably their best player. Definitely one of their most important. I mean, people will be saying, "Oh, what about Sturridge?" But Sturridge is barely on the pitch now. So I mean, no denying his talent. But I mean, in terms of like for likes, I guess I think it'd be quite hard for Liverpool to replace Coutinho.
Yeah, he was the Players' Player of the Year and Fans' Player of the Year last
Yeah,
year for
I don't
Liverpool,
think.
but not
For
for the Premier League.
okay.
But if you want to hear something depressing, he's actually 3 months younger than me, so he's only 23 still.
And
Just
he'd be in probably the sort of top 10 attacking mids in the league, but maybe top 7 off the top of my head. But I mean, if he's only 23 and he's obviously a very good player now, he keeps going. I think like you could see him fitting him at Barca at a few.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
He's
Yeah, I
got
think
that sort of
Barca's.
that
Yeah,
technical style where maybe could replace Iniesta, but I mean, I guess we'll have to wait and see.
yeah, absolutely. And then we've also had Leicester winning 1-0 against Southampton, which is sort of a predictable scoreline these days for Leicester, and they're just sort of doing what they need to do, keeping a clean sheet, scoring one goal, and another 3 points in the bank. 6 games to go now. I think they need another 12 points to basically lock up the title.
Leicester are doing what champions do, and what champions do is win. And it might not be pretty, it might not be nice on the eye, but they're getting results, and football is a results business, and they're doing what they need to do. And you see past champions over the years grind out those 1-0 wins, get those lucky wins that they probably shouldn't have, and that's exactly what Leicester are doing. They
And
were,
then, I'm sorry.
they were very lucky against Southampton. I think that Simpson was a definite
Yeah,
handball,
I was about to ask that.
probably hard to see in real time. But looking at the replay, you can see he brings his arm in and sort of swats the ball away. For me, no doubt a red and a penalty. But it's, I guess, luck of the draw, really. I'm sure Leicester have had some results go their way or against them, but they shouldn't have. But I mean, it's just what happens, and whether it's a conspiracy as seen by some outlets, who knows? But I mean, they're where they are because of the football they've played, and I don't think many people can really deny that.
I did see a very interesting point, which was that it wasn't necessarily a conspiracy, which would suggest that it was sort of a conscious, fixing of results, but it might be more of a sense that these referees and whoever look at Leicester and say, do I want to be the one who gets a decision wrong that might cost this side the title in this ridiculous season? And not that they do that deliberately or consciously in their mind, but unconsciously, referees might, towards the end of the season, be sort of much more tentative about making a controversial or a 50-50 call against Leicester because of a fear that it could impact on that title run.
Definitely, and I guess you can't really help that in a way where
Yeah.
if you're not sure, do you call the decision? Do you let it go? What do you do? But I mean, tough job being a referee, but it's you sort of don't want to be the one, or you might not want to be the one that you've got the finger of blame
Um,
for not getting them the title.
yeah. And then in the final game of the week, we had United beating Everton 1-0. And similar to Watford, I guess, Everton have the FA Cup to focus on as well. But having already mentioned, they're level on points with Bournemouth in the lower half of the table. I mean, they're behind West Brom. They've certainly had a very disappointing season, and you've got to wonder what Martinez's future at Everton is.
As Kizza says, every time he's a fraud, and I completely agree now. Lukaku has bailed him out something shocking, and I think without Lukaku, you'd see the real worries at Everton, and even Barkley at times too. He's got Deulofeu, Barkley, McCarthy, Lennon now, Lukaku. I mean, you should be getting better results than what did you say was 14th in the table or something?
Yeah.
I mean, for players with those five alone, you should be getting much better results than sitting in 12th with 38 points after 30 games. I mean, Stone's young, yeah, maybe too much hype around him, maybe that's affecting him. But Coleman's not a poor player. Baines isn't a poor player. Jagielka's not poor. Maybe Joel Riblas they can improve on. But I think the defensive side of Everton needs a lot of work, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Martinez out of a job at some point next season if they keep continuing where they are.
I think he basically needs to win the FA Cup from here to repair his standing with the fans and the club. I suspect they've just had a new investor come in the last month or two, to the tune of, I think it's, I don't know the numbers, but it's a significant amount of money being invested into that club, and I'm sure they would look at Martinez as a manager and what he's actually doing in terms of performances, and reconsider his position at the club. As you say, I mean, it seems to be one where he might get the chop early next season if results keep going to form.
Yeah,
Sorry,
he's. I don't think he's a good manager.
Yeah, well, it's amazing. I mean, Jats keeps going on about how, there aren't many managers to get a promotion after failure, and he got Wigan relegated. Granted, he won them the FA Cup, but to then get the job at Everton, Yes, he then got them finishing fifth, which we have to remember. But I'm not sure who made the point that that might have been before his defensive philosophy took hold at the club, and we've seen the fruits of that since then. With as you say, quite a poor defensive record.
Definitely, and you just wonder what they actually work on in training defensively because time and time again you've seen them just be torn apart and with silly errors and all sorts of things. So it's just, yeah, you wonder what's going on there with the defensive side.
And then we'll move on to the previews now and touch on a side that we haven't discussed yet, which is West Ham, who are playing your mob in the early game tonight. And Dimitri Payet, who has scored a couple of fantastic free kicks since the last podcast, one for France and also one against Crystal Palace. Um, he has to be just about player of the season, doesn't he? I mean, if you're not going to, sorry, not player of the season, signing of the season. If
No,
you're not,
player of the season isn't really an unfair call either, really. But it
yeah,
definitely signing of the season. I can't think of anyone else who would be up there.
I think Kante's the only one that I
Oh,
mention as a
Kante, yeah,
rival,
yeah.
but in terms of I mean, you look at West Ham's results when he's out of the side. I don't know the exact percentage of wins with him versus wins without him, but when he got injured in that middle stretch of the season and they started to drop off a bit,
Mm,
you could measure his impact. I mean, as soon as he came back into that side, their results started picking up again. So
yeah.
he sort of embodies that side at the moment.
Are they sort of turning into a one-man team with him though?
That I mean, that would be the concern, and it will be really interesting to see what they do in the off season in terms of bolstering the squad so that they can kind of spread the load a bit more.
Yeah, it'll be definitely interesting indeed. And with the new money coming in, they'll have a lot more to play with, and they're linked with Batshuayi from Marseille and a
Yeah.
few other and Havard Nordtveit, the former Arsenal youth player. So and apparently Sung's on his way out. So I mean, if they strengthen wisely, there's no reason why they can't finish a similar position as to where they are now, sort of top six, top seven sort of thing. So I mean, yeah.
And Lanzini's another one who's looked quite impressive for them
Who,
in his season.
and they've also signed him permanently.
Yeah, I think that was announced quite recently as well.
Yeah.
So as a young player, he looks quite promising for them as well. This is so obviously these are all rematches of the first game of the season, and it's probably an unhappy memory for you because I believe was it 2-0 or 3-0
2-0 at the Emirates, yep.
where Czech did not cover himself in glory.
Yeah.
How do you see this one turning out?
Well, we've got a very good record at Upton Park. It's the last time we'll play them there, as they'll be moving to the new stadium. Right now, I wouldn't be surprised if they beat us, but at the same time, do you look at history, take that into account? Because as I said, we've got a good record there. We're not playing poorly now either, so I think it'll be quite a good game. To give you a score, I don't actually know. It'll be close either way, I think, but I think we might snag it 2-1.
Yeah, I'm probably with you on that. I think Arsenal will get the result here.
Oh,
As we said at the start of the podcast, I think Arsenal's playing with a bit more freedom at this time of the
yeah,
season.
I think Iwobi will start, and probably Welbeck too. And Sanchez has hit some form again, so that'll be interesting against. I think Jenkinson's their right back, or
Yeah.
if he's on, he might be on. Is he on loan? If he's on loan, he can't play.
That's a good question actually. I think he might be on loan.
Yeah, if he won't be able to play then. But I mean, Sanchez has hit some form again, so that and Özil's always a threat. So it's going to be interesting to see how West Ham cope with that, and how we cope with Payet.
Absolutely. Aston Villa at home to Bournemouth. It's an interesting game in a way because I mean Villa are pretty much done. I think they're actually mathematically relegated if Norwich pick up a win and Villa lose against Bournemouth. So they don't really have a whole lot to play for, to be honest. But if they were ever going to get a result, it would be against someone like Bournemouth, whose season is basically done. But do you see Bournemouth getting the result?
You'd like to think they could against a very poor Villa side, but as we said, Bournemouth have been a bit up and down lately. So you'd probably back Bournemouth, but at the same time, it could be a draw. But I think if they did draw, Bournemouth would be very disappointed with themselves.
Yeah, I think that Bournemouth can probably get the win here, but it's going to be It'll be interesting in terms of how the result pans out, but it's not probably not going to be a game I tune into. Um, Norwich away to Crystal Palace is an interesting one because Palace, for all of the fact that they started the season so well, and they were up there with West Ham and with Leicester and Spurs and so on, as one of those sides that you really kind of admired for how they were going in the season. They haven't won in 2016, and it's now April.
It
And
makes you wonder how Pardew still has a job.
yeah, I mean,
And
7 points off the relegation zone,
yeah,
so probably just about safe.
they're dangerously close to that, though. They do have the game in hand, but again, if they don't win it, they're in big trouble. But if they do, they'll sort of be 6 clear in Norwich and equal with Swansea. So, I mean,
But if Norwich win this one,
but Palace, yeah, exactly. Palace don't have a poor side, and it makes you wonder what's gone wrong. I mean, Kabay is not a poor player. They have Balassi, Zaha, Gale, Scott Dan, sort of thing. So, I mean, it makes you wonder what's all gone wrong for Palace.
yeah, and it was something talked about when Pardew went there in the first place, I think, because everyone was sort of discussing Pardew's merits as a manager, and he seems to have like a good first year or first 6 to 8 months with the club, where he really sort of hits the ground running with them, but then really sort of tails off. Because if you remember, there was that first season with Newcastle where I think they might have finished fifth, I think, in his first season with them, and then since then it's just been dropping off a cliff, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's as I said, wonder how he's still in a job, and I think he's another one who should sort of be under a bit of heat.
Yes, absolutely. It'll be very interesting to see the winner of this game because if Norwich win, then and somehow Sunderland pick up a result against Leicester as they tend to do at this stage of the season, there could be some genuine heat on Palace in terms of staying up. Southampton at home to Newcastle, and this would sort of be seen as Newcastle's last chance, wouldn't it? I mean, they really need to pick up 3 points here to have any sort of hope of survival.
But yeah, I mean, and away from home too, it won't be easy. And I think Southampton, you'd have to favour them in this game.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because Benitez really hasn't had the impact that I thought he would at Newcastle. I really thought that he'd kind of get them going and pull them to safety, but
Yeah,
it's really not happened for them.
yeah, but I think that's again to the squad and who he's been dealt with, and I think having Carver there for so long was a horrible decision, absolutely horrible one. I'm sure NFC Toy will agree with that. But how he was given that caretaker job to start with and in it for so long, or I mean, it's just Mike Ashley and Randy Luna should just get together and fuck off football. Really, I mean,
Yeah,
they are destroying their
yeah,
clubs.
and they're both quite large historical clubs.
Definitely. I mean, Villa, and discussion on the board between Villa and Everton have met the most times in the history of English football because neither have been relegated.
Yeah,
So, I mean, but that's going to change after this season with the way Villa are going, and it's sad to see such a big club. I mean, Villa, they won the Champions Cup in '81, so I mean, it's sad to see a club with such historic ties, I guess, going down the gurgler.
Swansea at home to Chelsea in the next game, and Swansea have really kind of recovered after they had a very poor start to the season and sacked Gary Monk, and they're level on points with Watford, and essentially safe. I mean, they're on 37 points. Chelsea, they've probably ruled themselves out of a European spot, I would suppose. I can't really see them getting past Liverpool, Stoke, Southampton to get to one of those spots. But so neither side really has too much to play for at this stage, would you say?
Oh, it's never over until it's over. But based on what you said, sorry, it's unlikely that either will finish in Europe. But I mean, I think this might be a bit of a banana skin for Chelsea. I wouldn't be surprised if Swansea won. Wales generally gives teams a bit of a tough place to go, but I mean, we'll see what happens. But I wouldn't be surprised if Swansea edge it.
Sigurdsson's been in pretty remarkable form for Swansea. I think he's one of the top scorers in 2016. I think the stat is that only Aguero has scored more goals than him, or maybe Aguero and Kane have scored more goals than him. So he's certainly been a big part of this Swansea revival.
Yeah.
and he's been a terrific signing for them since crossing over from Tottenham.
Definitely, and I think he found his level. Maybe Spurs were that little bit too good for him, but I mean, he's excelling at Swansea and he's helping them do well. So I think it's a good match for both parties.
So Everton have two games this game week. The first of them is against Watford, and the second's against Palace. Um, Away to Watford, who are only 1 point behind them on the table, so it'll be quite an interesting one to see if Everton can sort of focus on the league for a bit and pull away from that bottom half of the table, or whether their mind really is just fixed on the FA Cup at this stage.
Mm, yeah, it's an interesting game, I think, and being at Watford definitely gives Watford a bit of an upper hand. And if Watford win that, they'll actually go above Everton. So but as you said, the two games in hand, Everton have in their favour. But I think they definitely will have one on the FA Cup, and they should be primarily focusing on that. I think. I mean, every club wants to win a trophy, and if Everton can get their hands on that, I'm sure they'll be very pleased.
Yeah, absolutely. So it'll be an interesting one. I do think Everton will probably shade it just because Watford have really sort of dropped off form-wise recently, and I think Everton, with Lukaku in the form that he's in, really should be putting away Watford, I suspect. The late game on the Saturday night is Man City up against West Brom. Um, just about, I mean, they do need to keep winning their games to keep fourth spot, and West Brom aren't an easy opponent, but you would suspect that they would be able to edge past West Brom.
You'd hope so, but I mean, Arteta Eddie had. I don't think they'll have much problem. De Bruyne's back, gives them another goal-scoring threat. So Silva's fit, Aguero's fit. I think those three alone will be hard to deal with.
Yeah, I think West Brom's season's just about done, so I suspect City should be able to put two or three past them.
They're sort of a nothing club, aren't they? They're just
Yeah.
there. They like what do they actually do? They
I,
just
yeah. I suspect they're sort of trying to follow the same model that Stoke did, where they've got Pulis there who's sort of giving them this mid-table. I mean, you have to remember before Pulis came in that they were fighting relegation
yeah.
quite consistently, and they're now 40 points with 7 games to go, and they're sitting 4 points
Yeah.
behind Chelsea, 5 behind Liverpool.
And I'm sure they have the board are just happy with that, so that just stay in the Premier League. We have a cup run. We have a cup run. If we don't, it doesn't matter. So I think they're just happy with Premier League status.
Yeah, and I mean, with the new money coming in, I suspect in the next season or two they might look to move Pulis on, and they'll get someone more attractive in, and do the same sort of thing that Stoke have done potentially, and try
Yeah.
and bring in those more attractive players.
Definitely, and I mean, Stoke's a good model to follow. I mean, they're sort of becoming a bit harder to dislike now with players like Shaqiri and Arnautovic, and they're performing quite well. They've had a bit of a run over the season, so I mean, they'd be a good model to follow.
The early game on the Sunday night is Sunderland at home to Leicester. It's an interesting one because, as we said earlier, this is sort of the point of the season where Sunderland starts to pull those results out of their behinds to sort of secure safety. Although they're a bit further behind safety than they usually would be, I suspect. And Leicester are just grinding out results as they get closer to that title. So it's a bit of a difficult one to call. I mean, if it was at the King Power, you might say that it'd be a pretty easy result for Leicester, but away from home, it might put a little bit of pressure on them.
Well, I think I mentioned in the matchday thread in very early pages, people have well forgotten now after at 19 pages before a ball's even been kicked. But I mean, it's sort of now, as you said, around the time where Sunderland just start to pull results out of their behind, and they go on these runs, and they beat sort of clubs near the top of the table, and they go on runs and just escape. But Leicester are in the form. Ranieri got manager of the month,
Yep.
so I expect them to grind out another 1-0 win. They should have enough quality to get past Sunderland, but you just never know what Fat Sam's going to pull out.
Yeah, I suspect that Leicester should be able to get the result, but I'm finding Leicester harder and harder to predict lately. Even though they keep winning, you just get that sense that one of these days that run's going to end and that they're going to drop points somewhere. So it's going to be an interesting one to keep track of, that's for sure. Liverpool at home to Stoke. As we've just been saying, Stoke have certainly shaken that dour tag this season, though I am still finding it a bit hard to reconcile that in my mind. I still see them as that sort of um, boring Tony Pulis side, but slowly but surely changing that mentality.
Yeah,
Liverpool, was it 5-1 or 6-1 last
six
season when
one, 6-1 last day.
yeah. So that was a pretty amazing result. So I guess Liverpool still would feel that they owe Stoke a little bit, despite getting that win on opening day of the season. Um, do you see Liverpool getting up in this one?
Um, at Anfield, you'd think so. They'll probably have. I mean, Surrey just sort of fit again. Whether he starts or not, we don't know. But Coutinho's been in good form, and I think with the movement off the ball from and Firmino too, the movement off the ball between those two alone might be hard to contain for Stoke. And you can see Liverpool sort of just pushing on and getting the job done.
Yeah, I probably agree with you on that one. I think Liverpool will probably have a bit too much to get it done. I think with Sturridge fit now as well, if he can start finding his scoring boots as well, then Liverpool become quite a dangerous proposition for sides. They've got quite a lot of attacking options in their forward line and in their midfield. So I think they'll probably get up 2 or 3-0 in that one, I suspect. Spurs at home to United in probably the most significant game of the round in a few ways because if if United can win that game, it keeps putting pressure on City in fourth. And if Spurs drop points, it really almost hands the title to Leicester. Alternatively, if Spurs win that one, it would essentially make City safe in fourth, and of course keep pressure on the title race. So how do you see this one panning out?
Um, I think Spurs will do it at the Lane. Definitely, home crowd is going to give them a big boost. United, I mean, they do have the firepower up front, but the way Van Gaal has them playing is so static and it's not fluid, and they sort of just they sit back and they defend. And I think if you sit back against Spurs, you're going to cop it, and Kane will be very hard to contain for them. I think it'll be interesting to see how they handle how Spurs handle Martial.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think Spurs with that draw against Liverpool are maybe starting to show a few signs of nerves. Watching the extended highlights of that one, I saw that Liverpool did look quite dangerous in the first half. I mean, admittedly, Spurs grew into it in the second half, but I do get the sense that maybe there is a sense of nerves growing with Spurs players. So it'll be really interesting to see how they handle the United side and whether United come at them or if, as you say, I mean, if United sit back, it really plays into Spurs' hands and it gives them a chance to grow into the game.
I think they will sit back too, especially being at White Hart Lane. So,
Yeah,
I mean, and we've seen many times that Spurs can punish or do punish teams rather.
absolutely. So that'll be quite interesting. And then the final game we've kind of already touched on is the game in hand for Everton and Palace, at home for Palace. Um, Depending on the way results go elsewhere, I mean, if Norwich get the win over Palace, then this becomes a really dangerous game for Palace, because they wouldn't be too far off the relegation places, and they would be level on points with Norwich, so they would really be looking for a win against Everton.
Yeah, but and to focus on that weak Everton defense would be a smart thing to do. But then they have to, at the same time, if they do that, they need to contain Lukaku too, which is not easy given his size and his frame and the form he's in. I mean, he's third highest scorer in the league on 18, only behind Vardy and Kane. So, I mean, to score against Everton is one thing, but then to contain Lukaku at the same time is a whole nother story altogether.
And interestingly, I think they have quite a good record against Everton, so it could be quite an interesting one for them. And really, I mean, they're another side like Watford and Everton who probably have one eye on the cup. So there's probably a bit of a theme there with all three sides not really playing too well the last 3 or 4 match days. I mean, obviously in Palace's case, it's been a lot longer than that, but they would be. I would think that they'd be looking for at least another win or two to really sort of secure safety, which is a remarkable thing to think about considering where they started the season.
Definitely, definitely. So, I mean, it's interesting to see which way it will go. I'd fancy Everton the way Palace have been going, but it might end in a draw.
Yeah, I'm probably with you on that one. I think Everton might just shade it, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that one was a draw. Um, well, thank you very much for coming on, Cruyff.
Thank you for having me.
It's been an interesting one. I think we've covered a fair few topics on that.
Yeah, definitely. We definitely have.
So thanks very much for everyone for listening in. I'll try and have this up so that everyone can get a chance to listen to it before the games tonight. And until next time, we'll see you on the forums.